community, this is Tommy in North Carolina, and I want to do a video this evening that highlights some of the albums that I own that won the Grammy for Album of the Year. Grammy award-winning albums. Now the Grammys are really a lot of debate surrounding them, especially considering who's won and who hasn't won, and especially for what people have won things for. And so I do kind of buy into the bogus sort of stature of Grammys, that to win a Grammy isn't just everything, but it is a high accolade, especially receiving an award from among your peers, and so on and so forth. So, and it's, you know, Grammy award-winning artist, ... has a nice ring to it. So I really don't want to get into the politics of it. I just kind of want to talk about a little bit about the albums themselves that have won for Album of the Year. Now, the Grammy started in 1959. The first recipient was Henry Mancini, the music from Peter Gunn. But I have to go all the way to 1968 for my first Grammy award-winning album, which is the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This is the only Beatles album that ever won Grammy for Album of the Year. So there you go, right off the bat. When you think about the Beatles, one of the most legendary artists in music, they only won one Grammy for Album of the Year, and it was for Sgt. Pepper. Now, if you're going to win one for Pepper, because it's a landmark album, and we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Pepper. But again, this was it, and this kicked off my Grammy albums. So we'll keep moving forward. Hello, it's future me. This is kind of weird. I'm cutting into my own video. But when I put together this video about a week or so ago, I knew I was leaving something out. It was always on my mind, and I didn't publish it. I just kind of sat on it. So I realized I did forget one. It was in my listen to stack, and I discovered it. It's 1969's Glenn Campbell, By the Time I Get to Phoenix. This won Grammy for Album of the Year in 1969. So this kind of goes into the streak, but you know, the late Glenn Campbell, fantastic guitarist, singer, session guy for a long time. This is on Capitol Records. Of course, it features By the Time I Get to Phoenix, his version of Homeward Bound. Quite a few good songs on here. Incredible voice, just an immense talent. I'm a huge fan of Wichita Lineman, but this is a really nice album. It holds up very well, and this won the Grammy for Album of the Year. So I'm going to go back to the past now and pick up where the other one left off. Anyway, Glenn Campbell. The next one is next. 1970, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the self-titled album. Now, this is the album with Spinning Wheel, You've Made Me So Very Happy, God Bless the Child. This is the David Clayton Thomas Blood, Sweat, and Tears, post Al Cooper. It's a commercial album. Blood, Sweat, and Tears, one of those horny bands like Chicago and later Tower of Power. But this is a really, really good album. It's a commercial-sounding album, but it sounds good, and it's got some really good hits on it. 1971, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, collectively Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. This album was a huge commercial record for them, with lots of hits, including the title track. Cecilia is on this album, The Boxer. Just a classic album, top to bottom, and certainly one of their most well-known albums. Go forward to 1972, another huge album, Carole King's Tapestry. Now, Carole King, as most of you know, toiled as a songwriter throughout the 60s, wrote several hits for people like Phil Spector. But this was her first sort of real solo album, produced by Lou Adler. But this album was a huge breakthrough. It had her versions of some songs that she'd written, I Feel the Earth Move, So Far Away. Just, you know, the early 70s was full of the sort of singer-songwriter period, James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, a lot of people like that. And Carole King, this album really just struck a nerve with a lot of those listeners. And, of course, it won the Grammy. The next one is George Harrison and Friends, The Concert for Bangladesh. This was the first sort of all-star benefit rock concert. This album featured Ravi Shankar, of course George Harrison, Bob Dylan in a very rare performance up to that point, Billy Preston, Leon Russell. They're all on this record, and I think it's a 5-disc set of just incredible music recorded live at Madison Square Garden. And the story was, from what I understand, my friend Sean in New Orleans Hi, Sean. His stepdad was at the second show. There were 2 shows at the Garden that day, and he went to the second show and was going in, and the crowd that was leaving the first show were all talking about Dylan. So the surprise of Dylan wasn't really a surprise for the second show. Sean can comment in the comment section down there and verify this. But yeah, this record is almost as well known for the Dylan set as it is the George Harrison stuff. But it's a good record. The next one, 1974, Stevie Wonder, one for Intervisions, which is one of his classic albums. Of course, this was a landmark album as well, particularly for Tamla Motown. And this was a big breakthrough for Stevie Wonder as an artist. People began to really appreciate his talent as a multi-instrumentalist, a writer, and a producer. And they paid him in full because the next year he won again 2 in a row for Fulfilling This' first finale, which I actually like this album better than I probably like Intervisions. But Stevie was on a roll during this period, and it really shows. But fantastic record, absolutely great. Paul Simon, he's a big-time Grammy guy, still crazy after all these years. Now, a little word about Paul Simon. I think Paul Simon, probably behind Bob Dylan, is one of America's greatest songwriters. Now, he's not as varied as Dylan is, and so his style kind of, I say he's not varied. I mean, he's done a lot of different stuff, and we'll talk about that later on. But, Dylan's really been a chameleon, and there's so many different facets to Dylan's career. Paul Simon's career seems to have just kind of blossomed and grown, and so he's definitely not the same person, but he's a great songwriter, and harmonically he's absolutely. The next one is 1978, and it's a huge album, and a lot's been said about it. Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. This is the second album that the band did with the team of Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, and this album just put Fleetwood Mac on the map commercially. It sold tons and tons of copies, but song for song, it is a wonderful record. Now, a lot's been said about the breakup and all the things that went behind the album and making it, but the album's definitely fraught with a lot of tension, and particularly in the area of relationships. But it is a wonderful record, and it's a wonderful sounding record. So it's worthy of all the praise. I definitely can see why that album has endured. Soundtrack album, The Bee Gees. This is the time capsule for disco music. This is the soundtrack to the film Saturday Night Fever, the John Travolta soundtrack, featuring a lot of songs written by Barry Gibb and featuring the Bee Gees. And like I said, if people want to know what disco music is, this is the album to go to. It's a double record set, and it features just a lot of dance music as well as some ballads. And love it or hate it, it was an iconic moment in music, and the album represents that. Billy Joel won in 1980 for 52nd Street. I'm just now really discovering Billy Joel. Billy Joel to me has always kind of been, to me, kind of the American counterpart to Elton John, and for a long time they seem to be conjoined at the hip. But really and truthfully, it's not fair to Billy Joel or Elton John, because Billy Joel's got that New York sort of sensibility. Songwriting's a little bit tougher with a little more edge to it. But maybe the fact that they both play piano, and a lot of people think Piano Man is an Elton John song as much as it is Billy Joel. But this is 52nd Street. It's got My Life on it, Big Shot are a couple of the hits. And so Billy Joel, Album of the Year, 52nd Street. We go ahead to 1982, John Lennon and Yoko Ono for Double Fantasy. Now, it's a shame that Lennon never got a Grammy during his lifetime, I guess, if you don't count the Sgt. Pepper Grammy. But as a solo artist, he never won one. But you know who also has never won one? Paul McCartney. So there you go. But Double Fantasy was the final album he did, and reached some commercial success thanks to songs like Watching the Wheels and Woman that were hits. But most notably, this is the album that was released shortly before his death. Go ahead to 1984, another huge selling album, iconic album, Michael Jackson's Thriller, This is the album produced by Quincy Jones and just featured tons and tons of hits. Also MTV hits like Billie Jean, Beat It, all of those songs, the title track, which with the iconic video. But this is an album that, I think Michael Jackson won, 50 Grammys that year, and so it just made sense to give it to him for this one as well. But when you look back at history, yeah, it probably is the album of the year. And then Michael Jackson's buddy and pal, Lionel Richie. I've shown this album before, Can't Slow Down. That's one of my childhood albums. But this album had a ton of hits on it, All Night Long, Penny Lover, Stuck on You. It was a huge record, and Lionel Richie took home the Grammy that year. So now we go ahead to 1987, where Paul Simon wins yet another Grammy for Album of the Year for Graceland. Now, Graceland, this is where I talk about how Simon did grow artistically. This album featured a lot of African groups and vocal groups that were singing with Paul Simon on this album. And he took a lot of flack for it, particularly with the political climate in Africa at the time. But, as an album just to listen to and just, it is a wonderful record. This record is definitely worthy of a Grammy for Album of the Year, and this was for 1987. Produced by Roy Haley and Paul Simon. This is Graceland. And now we go all the way to 1997 to get my next Album of the Year Grammy. And 1997 was a year, it was 1998 when it won, but Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind. This album won the Album of the Year Grammy, produced by Daniel Lanois. But I remember following quite closely that year because there were several really great albums that were nominated. Paul McCartney's Flaming Pie, Radiohead's OK Computer was nominated that year, and I want to say Beck's Odelay. So some really landmark albums. Now, this is the album that put Dylan kind of back on people's minds. He had kind of faded away in the 80s, and in the early 90s he was doing a couple of cover records. So this was sort of a return to form for Dylan. He's really kind of followed it up with several albums that I might even say are superior. But this has Daniel Lanois' spooky sort of atmospheric production, very sort of, kind of spooky sounding, ethereal type stuff. But Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind. And then we have to go all the way to 2013, the last Album of the Year Grammy that I own, is a Grammy Award-winning album, Mumford & Sons, Babel. This album was their second album behind Sigh No More. And I know there's a lot of mixed feelings about Mumford & Sons. I happen to like Mumford & Sons a lot. I think they're a great band. I've seen them live, and I think they're excellent live. Great harmonies. But the songs to me are just full of life and energy. And so this is one of those that, like I said, I understand the criticism, and they were, for a while there, they were just the biggest thing in music. But I love the fact that guitar-based songs was all over the radio and winning Grammys for Album of the Year. So those are my albums that I own for Grammy Album of the Year. Comment, like, share down below. Tell me what you think about the Grammys or any of these albums that I discussed or anything like that. Keep the vinyl tag videos going for 2018. I have really enjoyed doing mine, and I've enjoyed watching a few of them. Jeff Party, I know, did one, Cracking Vinyl. Sean Zlock did one. And so these have been really fun to watch, and I've enjoyed seeing them, and I hope to see some more of you guys post those videos. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. I also have a second channel now. It's called Daily Records. The link is up above in my description box or whatever. So go check out Daily Records. I look at a different album every single day, and I'm going to try to do it for as long as I can. But go check those out. They're kind of short videos. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time, Vinyl Community.